Chappell Roan is a lesbian witch who uses astrology. And we love that. So Chappell Roan drops the subway right during a Mercury Cazimi in her 10th house. And for those of you who don't know, Cazimi is when Mercury gets so close to the sun, it's like we get a supercharge from that planet of communication happening in her 10th house of public reputation and career. And she gets this song about obsessive heartbreak that becomes a massive hit. Now, I don't know if Chappell Roan used an astrologer to launch this release during the Mercury Cazimi, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and confirm it. Chappell Roan is a lesbian witch who uses astrology. And we love that. But it is not too uncommon for businesses, companies, celebrities, musicians, and writers to hire an astrologer for a launch date. Regardless of if she used an astrologer or not, let's break down why this timing was genius. So you've got this Mercury Cazimi happening. We're 1 minute late. They're 1 minute apart. Chappell, rookie mistake. But I actually want to start by looking over the moon's placement. The reason we want to look at the moon is because for business astrology, the moon does represent the physical product. It is the tangible thing that you are providing and putting out into the world. And in this case, we see the moon in Scorpio. Not necessarily the moon's favorite place to be on paper, but very, very good for this launch. With a Scorpio moon, your product goes deep. It gets obsessive. It becomes somewhat psychological. It talks about the stuff that's usually happening behind the scenes. And in this case, we see that Scorpio moon really reflected in her lyricism. The song is somewhat obsessive. She's stalking her memories and her visions of this person from the past. I see your shadow even with the lights off. That is some deep psychological shit. That's really textbook Scorpio energy. Scorpio notices everything and doesn't forget anything. It turns emotional pain into something everyone else feels as well. And this is such a good moon for this song, and it succeeds because it's that specific kind of obsessive that we all recognize because it is intrinsic to human nature. She's just saying it out loud. Also, good to point out, Scorpio moon in the first house using Koch house system, works very well, and we see that it forms a lovely trine to her natal Sun and Jupiter in Pisces in the 5th house of creativity. So just based on that moon placement, we have really solid timing, but we haven't even gotten into the Mercury Cazimi yet. Mercury Cazimi is a point when Mercury is crossing over one of its retrograde thresholds. So you get a Mercury Cazimi anytime that Mercury goes retrograde, and then once it stops being retrograde and starts moving forward again, you're going to have another Cazimi. Now, I am not one of those astrologers who tells you that you have to pause and delay all of your plans for Mercury retrograde, and the release of this song is an amazing example of why you shouldn't really be afraid of Mercury retrograde. And certainly, Chappell is not the only person who released something during this period. There are several companies that had major announcements and launches. And it really comes down to, what does the Mercury retrograde contribute to your project or to this period in your life? And in this case, again, we've got this song that's purely about reflection, with Mercury moving backwards and retracing its steps. So it feels very fitting for it to happen during this retrograde and during this Cazimi. Again, that Cazimi is sort of like this crystal clear communication moment where suddenly things make sense. And it also is just typically an auspicious time where there's alignment between thought and action. Leo is the sign of the performer, and in many ways, Leo placements can give you the energy and the confidence that you need in order to be vulnerable and to put yourself out there. Now, looking at some of the aspects to this Mercury Cazimi that's taking place to her natal chart, I want to start with this direct opposition to Chappell's natal Uranus in Aquarius. Chappell has historically been someone who really enjoys keeping her private life private, and she has been very clear about setting boundaries with fans, which I absolutely respect. And that Uranus there creates sort of a disruption between private life and public life. And the way that I'm interpreting this personally, the song feels like it's a real personal event that Chappell has gone through in her private life. And that disruption in private life forming an opposition from fourth house to 10th house in a way that launches it into the public. So I didn't know this originally, but Chappell has Moon and Pluto conjunct in Sagittarius in her natal chart, and that is forming a 2-degree trine to that Mercury Cazimi at the time of this launch. And again, just super convenient for the astrological timing of this song for it to be such a emotional and seemingly personal thing that Chappell went through in her life and wrote about. That combination of Moon and Pluto trining and easily flowing into that Mercury Cazimi, just incredibly beneficial for clarity and authenticity in emotional expression. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see more songs released by her while this trine happens to an aspecting planet. That's a really convenient period in launch time that sets her up for a lot of success. She kind of gets this slingshot moment coming from Uranus and the Moon and Pluto in her chart. Now, the last thing that I want to cover about this launch was how it hit her natal Mars. And if you look at her natal Mars, you have the transiting North Node right on top of her Mars in the 5th house. Really great for releasing or moving forward with creative projects there. Anytime you have the North Node involved in something, that is something that works to your advantage. And if you can use it, use it. But it's also creating this trine here to Chiron in Scorpio. Trust issues, loyalty issues, connection and enmeshment issues is one of those key themes from that Chiron in Scorpio. So totally relevant as well. Chiron as the wounded healer here, we can absolutely see her turning her pain into creative expression. And that's something that she'll kind of have throughout the rest of her life with that Chiron trine to Mars in the 5th. It's like she's ripping her soul out every time she's writing, or when she's creating work, you're getting a piece of her pain from it. Maybe not in Hot to Go, but at least in this song. So whether or not Chappell hired an astrologer for this launch, I cannot tell you, regardless of whether or not her team planned it or it was intended. The timing just absolutely perfect. It captured the public zeitgeist in a really compelling way. And that, my friends, is the type of strategic astrological intelligence that separates good launches from great launches.